Hey, what's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Hopefully you're having a great day. Welcome back to the Simulator series. In today's episode, we are going to be creating a Settings GUI, and in the next episode, we're going to be scripting it so that you can add settings to your simulator. As always, if you guys do enjoy the episode or it does help you guys out, make sure you smash the like button, also hit the subscribe button, and turn this post notification on if you want to get notified when I upload more Roblox development content. Additionally, I do have a Patreon if you guys like to support me and gain access to all the scripts and the game file that I make during this episode. There's a link down below in the description, and you guys can go and check that out. With that being said, let's get into it. So to quickly showcase the feature that we're going to be making today, when we join the eating simulator, we can see that they have a Settings GUI button on the right hand side of the screen, and when you click this pops up with a little menu that says settings. It has a little subtitle here, change these settings to have more fun, and then it has a couple of settings listed right here. Once you click on the button, that'll change from on to off, and then that will say disable the pop-ups or disable the music, and then you can also click off to turn it back on, and that's exactly how it works, and that's what we'll be creating today. So hopping back in Roblox Studio, let's go into our starter GUI and look inside of the buttons GUI, as this is where we store all of our on-screen buttons. Inside of the button holder, we currently have the cell button. Let's go ahead and duplicate this and rename this to settings. Now, if their button setup was just one word, we could easily just change this text from cell to settings, but they actually have a little gear icon with the word settings underneath of it, so it's going to be slightly more complex. What we're going to do is we're actually going to set the text to blank, so there won't be any text displayed directly inside of this button. We also want to resize it a little bit, so we want it to be a little bit thinner, and we'll kind of just increase the size a little bit, something like that. I don't think that's too big. I think that's actually pretty good. We also want to align this to the right, so if we look inside of the UI list layout, we can look at the horizontal alignment and we can set this to the right, and now that box will be set directly to the right hand side. We also want to change the background color of this, so instead of it being green, we want this to be some sort of gray, so let's put it something like that, and let's also add to custom colors so that we can reuse this color later, because that's going to be the same color as that little settings menu that we're going to open. So now that we got both of those, what we then want to do is we want to add in a brand new text label. We can call this text label the icon and set the text of this to the actual gear icon. They most likely use an image label to set up their GUI, but since we're making this simple, we'll just be using a gear emoji instead. So now that we rename this, what we want to do is we want to set the background transparency to 1, so it's completely transparent. Then we want to make sure that the text is set to the gear icon like we have right there. We also want to enable scaled so that it increases the size. We also want to modify the size as well. We'll set the X to 1 so that it stretches the entire width, and then we probably want the height to be like 0.5 and then comma 0 so that it stretches about halfway through. We then also want to set the position as well. We don't really have to move this too much. We're just going to move it down on the y-axis a little bit. We'll set this to about 0.12, and that looks pretty good. What we then want to do is we'll duplicate this icon text label and we'll rename this to title. Let's then set the text of this to settings, and we want the text color to actually be white. We'll also change the font from Source Sans to Gotham Black or bold. I think I'll go with black here. And then for the position, we're going to want 0.5 so that it's halfway down, and then for the size, we want it to stretch across the entire x-axis, so 1 is fine, and then we'll probably make this a little bit bigger, so like 0.58, and now that looks pretty good. If we look at the mobile view, we can see that the corners are really weird. It actually looks like a circle right here, and the reason for that is because the UI corner, we actually forgot to set this to scale, and currently it's in offset. So what we're going to do is we'll set this to 0.2 comma 0, and that actually looks pretty good. Maybe we want it to be a little bit more curved, so like 0.25, and now if we look at it again, we can see that looks a little bit better. Additionally, maybe we want the title to be a little bit smaller, so something like that, and then let's center it once again, so 0.5, and then 0.5 for the anchor point, and there we go, that's centered, and I think that actually looks perfect. The only thing that I think we want to do is maybe pick a little bit of a brighter gray for this, because it seems like that's what they have, so I think this gray is pretty good, and we'll also make sure that we add that to the custom color as well. Additionally, before we forget, let's go inside of cell and adjust this UI corner to be scaled and not offset. So let's just try 0.25 comma 0, and that actually literally looks the exact same. So if we look on mobile view again, that looks perfect. So I think that's pretty good. Now the button is pretty much finished, and like I said, we'll do the scripting on the next episode. We'll just be creating GUIs in this episode. What we're now going to do is we're now going to create the actual frame which holds and displays all the settings. So let's go ahead and duplicate our max food GUI, and we'll rename this to settings, and let's also enable this as well. Now what we want to do is we want to delete the extra frame right there. We then then want to change the background color of this to the same gray color that we were using before, so that one right there. Let's rename the notification frame right here to frame. Then we can delete the shop button because we are never going to use a purple button, but we're going to keep the sell button, as this is pretty similar to the on button. We just got to change the background color a little bit, rename it, and change the text. And we'll leave the message and title for right now. And now what we're going to do is we're actually going to increase the size of this frame because their settings frame is pretty big. So I think that's decent. What we're then going to do is we'll center it real quick. So 0.5 and 0.5. There we go. Just like that. I think that's pretty good. Then what we're going to do is we're going to add a brand new frame and we're going to call this title. And then we will set the size of it to 0.5, 0, 0.5, 0 so that it's scaled. And then what we want to do is we want to center this because we're basically recreating where on their GUI it says settings, which is going to be the title. So I think that looks pretty good. It does stick out a good amount on the top. I'd say it's more than halfway. So something like that. I think that is pretty perfect. Let's make sure that it is 100% centered. So position 0.5, 0, and then change this to 0.5 as well, but don't touch the Y at all. Okay, now it's perfectly centered, which is great. Let's then drag the title text label inside of here and also change the background color of this to the same background color that we have here. So just like that, now it's the same color. And we also want to add a UI corner into here as well so that it's curved a little bit. We want to make this a little bit bigger. I think 0.4 should be good. So yeah, that looks pretty good. Then for the title, what we want to do is we'll just set the size to the max and then we'll set the text to settings. And let's change the position to 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. And there we go. That looks pretty good. I think we might want to make the text just a little bit smaller. So something like that I think would be pretty good. And now I guess let's go ahead and recenter the text. So there we go. It's now recentered and that looks pretty good. We're now done with the title. Let's rename the text label message to subtitle because that's what this is pretty much going to be. And this is going to say change these settings to have more fun, exclamation mark. There we go. And now let's drag this up here a little bit. It's going to be right under our settings title. And I think that's actually pretty perfect. Maybe we'll make it a little bit larger, something like that. Then of course we want to center it. So 0.5, 0.5. There we go. That's centered and that looks all good. What we're then going to do is let's make this not visible for right now. Then we're going to duplicate the title frame and we are going to rename this from title to container. And then we're actually going to delete the title text label that's inside of there. And then we're going to change the background color from this gray to just a little bit of a darker gray, probably something like that. And then we can also add it to the screen color. So there we go. Then what we're going to do is we want, wow, that the corners are scaled massively. So we're probably definitely going to adjust this. We want it to be pretty large and we need to adjust this UI corner because wow, that is gigantic. So 0.1, that probably is what we're going to go with. But let's go ahead and expand it just a little bit more. So I think that is pretty good. Now let's go ahead and center it. So 0.5, 0.5, 0.5, 0.5, and there we go. That's pretty good. Maybe we bring it down just a little bit more like that. We can also expand it on the sides a little bit too, if that's what we want to do. Let's center the X again, and that looks pretty good. I think this gray is actually just a little bit darker, so I think that's the gray that we should actually go with, and that's what I'm going to do, and that'll be the final time we change the color. Now that we have that inside of the container, we're going to add a brand new scrolling frame. And then of course we want to make the size scale. So 0.5, 0, 0.5, 0. There we go. And the background transparency is going to be 1 because we want to be completely transparent. The border size pixel should be 0 so that we can get rid of that little line right there. The scroll bar thickness, we probably want to make that a little bit smaller, maybe 6. Yeah, that's probably pretty good. And then we also want to make this a decently brightish gray, so I'm just going to go all the way up and that looks pretty good. Then we want to resize this to fit within this container, so let's do something like that. I think that is pretty good. And then let's also center this as well, so 0.5, 0.5, 0.5, 0, 0.5, 0, and that looks pretty good. We'll also rename this scrolling frame to container. So container is inside of container. That might be a little confusing. You guys can name it differently, but you'll see why in the next episode when we're scripting this, why we're naming a container. You might also be wondering, why did I create a frame to hold this scrolling frame? The reason for that is because if you put a UI corner inside of a scrolling frame, it doesn't actually affect it. We can test this out by setting the background transparency of the scrolling frame to 0, drag the UI corner into there, and we can see that there is absolutely no effect on this at all. So that's why we have the scrolling frame inside of another frame that has the UI corner in it so that we can make those edges curve. Next, we're going to add a frame inside of the container container, and this is going to be called template. And then we also want to get a UI grid layout added inside of the container as well. Now for the cell padding, we're just going to set this all to 0 for right now. The cell size, we want the X to be 0.9, 0, 0.2, 0. We'll see how big that is. Okay, so that's pretty big, so we'll actually shorten that. But what we then want to do is we want to set the horizontal alignment to center so that it's in the center. And then back to the cell size, we want to make the Y probably like 0.1. I think that's pretty good. Maybe we'll make that like 1, 2, 5. And I think that actually might be perfect, so we'll leave it at that. Next, we're going to copy this UI corner and put that into this frame right here. So now it's curved a little bit. We probably want to make it a little bit more curved, so we'll set this to like 0.2. And I think that's pretty good. Additionally, we could even increase the cell size from like 0.9 to 0.95. Depends on how you guys really want it. I think that looks good. Next, we're going to set the background color of the template to this lighter color right here, which seems to be the same color on the outside border. Now what we're going to do is let's go inside of the title frame and copy this title right here, drag into the template, and then let's resize this. So let's put it to about like right there. It seems like this mostly stretches on the upper half of this frame right here. And then let's set the alignment from center to left so that it goes to the left, and that looks good. Let's also change the font because this shouldn't be Gotham Black, maybe Gotham or Gotham Bold, but I think it probably would just be Gotham. And let's also change the text to one of their settings. So pop-up effects. There we go. That looks pretty good. Then we'll duplicate this and rename this to description. And this will be the bottom half of this. So like that will be probably pretty good. And then we can also drag this out pretty far as well. Then what it's going to say is disable the pop-up effects for coins and food. This is just temporary. You guys don't have to fill this out. I just like to add the text so that we can actually see what this should look like if the text is long. So we could make this a little bit smaller, and then we'll make the title a little bit larger. So drag that down. That looks pretty good. We could even drag it out further if we wanted to. Check on mobile. It all looks pretty good. That's all scaled properly and everything, so that's great. Then the final thing that we want to do is let's drag the cell bun inside of the template, and then we want to make it visible because remember we made it not visible in the beginning. Resize this so that it looks like their bun, and I think that's pretty good. You can make it a little bit smaller, bigger. It doesn't really matter. And then let's also make sure that we center this as well. So 0.5, 0.5. That looks great. We'll then rename this from cell bun to just button. It really doesn't matter. You can name it whatever you want to. And then we're going to change the color from that green to a much brighter green, I'd say. Maybe a little bit darker. So I think that's good. And then let's also change the text from cell to on. Sweet. So that looks exactly like how they have it. Now what we're then going to do is we'll duplicate this template by hitting Control D, and now we can see we need to add a little bit of space inside of here. So inside of the cell padding, we're going to actually set the Y and make sure that you adjust the scale to 0.01 for right now. That's almost perfect, maybe just a little bit bigger, so 0.015. That looks like perfect spacing between them. So now on their settings, they have 4 settings. Let's see if we duplicate this. We have 3, 4, so only 3 currently fit inside of here. What you guys could do is you could adjust the cell size if you wanted to have more fit on one screen. So instead of like 0.125, we could make this like just 0.1 per se, and now 4 fit on the screen, and that actually does look pretty good, so maybe we'll do that. But you can keep duplicating this and see how many you can actually fit onto here. If you want to fit more, what you could do is you could either adjust the cell size, or inside of the scrolling frame you can also adjust the canvas size property. So the canvas size property, currently it's 2. What we could do is we could expand this to 4. That will make all this larger, but we then go back to the grid layout and adjust the Y size from 0.1 to like 0.05 per se, and then that's pretty similar to how we just had it. Maybe we even want to make it a little bit smaller too. We could say 0.25. That's way too small. Maybe 0.04. That looks pretty good, but we also have to adjust the spacing as well. So there we go. It all depends on what you guys want to do. I'm going to go back and I'm just going to undo all these templates real quick and just go back to where we only had 1. And now we have the whole GUI completely made. What we're then going to do is with this template, the reason that we didn't add all the settings directly into this yet is because rather than adding each setting individually, we're going to be doing that with scripting and make it way easier and way more robust. So anyways, ladies and gentlemen, with that being said, I hope that you guys did enjoy the episode, and hopefully it did help you guys out. If it did, as always, make sure you smash the like button, also the subscribe button, and turn this post notifications on if you want to get notified when I upload more Roblox development content. Additionally, I do have Patreon if you guys like to gain access to all the scripts and the game file I made during this episode. There's a link down below in the description, and you guys go check that out. With that being said, I hope that you guys have a great day, and I'll see you guys in the next episode.